let's discuss this topic because it is interesting, it is engaging, maybe even challenging. Let's check out this comment I received on a video called "The Reverse One Drop Rule for Black Americans. I am confused." So this is me wanting to have an open conversation with Black Americans, understanding the perception that they have. I want to understand things better, so I make videos. I don't do my research. If you want me to do research, you're watching my research. I do these videos, find out what people in the comment section have to say, and that's as much research as I'm going to do, because to me, that's living. That's reality. That's more important and relevant to me than anything else anybody else to say. People who respond to me in real time, honestly, I'm taking that more seriously. So I'm looking at the comments though I received on that video, the reverse one drop rule for Black Americans. And here's a comment from Heather T. Quote, "You need to ask your white family members, friends, colleagues, and look at history books by white Americans as they created this manipulative rule." Talking about the one drop rule. So that was a comment. And then it seemed like the person assumed that I was racist or had racist ancestors. So I responded, you know me, I said, "Do you believe I am immoral?" Because that's what people tend to do in the comment section of my videos. They want to imply that I'm ignorant, immoral, or wrong. That's the go-to thing. So I just meet them where they're at and say, okay, so do you think I am that thing that you're implying? Heather T then responded, quote, "If you're asking in relations to America's definition of immoral and race, then the drops of non-white European blood dictates that you are. If asking as a human, only you know the answer." So I don't know if this person, Heather T, even knows my ethnic background. It's as if they're assuming I'm 100% Anglo. So then I responded, quote, "So you have absolutely," I'm asking them, Heather T, "so you have absolutely no European DNA and you've taken a DNA test to prove it?" And then the response I got back from Heather T, quote, "I commented on your video. What do you want from Black viewers?" And then I responded, and this is where it ended. I said, "It sounds like both you and I share this same European DNA," end quote. So after that, I got no response. But I am confused by this because this is going back to what I said in the video originally about the reverse one drop rule. No, as for me, do I think that it's a good thing to have, if you're one drop of this, then that means you're, no, of course not. I openly talk about DNA test on this video because, hey, now with modern day science, we can do that. And that's an interesting and fascinating thing, especially for the United States. Those of us who are here, many of us cannot trace our ancestry back very far. And so now suddenly we can. And we can figure out our ethnic background. Now, I've made multiple videos for Black Americans, and I said, hey, here's what I predict. I predict, those of you who have taken DNA tests, I predict that it shows that you're somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of African descent, and the rest is probably European, maybe a little bit of Native American. The people who watch those videos and are Black Americans commented back on the videos and said, here were my results. And sure enough, without exception, they all matched up, unless they consider themselves biracial, having one white parent and one Black parent. But if both parents were perceived as being Black, the DNA test shows between 2/3 and 3/4. That's the general rule, how it works here in the United States if you take a DNA test. So I was talking about that and saying, it's really interesting and confusing to me, this whole concept of, well, how Black do you need to be to be considered Black? Because we all know the whole thing with Rachel Dolezal, or however you say her name, where she was 0% African descent, but she identified as African American. And so African Americans were saying, hey, you're a poser, get out of here. It's cool if you want to be part of our culture, but don't pretend that you are African if you're not actually African. So then we had this kind of reverse concept of, well, so then you do need to be a little bit African at least before you can identify as African American. You can't just say that I am, because you can't share in the same struggle as Black Americans have had to struggle through. So that's why I made a video about the reverse one drop rule, because you do have to be somewhat. Now granted, my mother's DNA test shows up, I think, as 2% African. So by default, that would make me wonder. So if we're going by the reverse Windrup rule, technically that means that I'm African American. By no means am I claiming to be African American. But I'm saying it's confusing. That's what I'm saying. It's confusing. Because ultimately, when you look at the DNA test results of Black Americans, you're going to see between 2/3 and 3/4 African, and the rest, the majority of the remaining, is going to be European. Typically, that's what you're seeing. So if we're going to be talking about demonizing our European ancestors, we're still in the same boat. Who's to say that my European ancestors were even slave owners? The truth of it is, my European ancestors were so poor, I'm sure they were not owning any slaves. And then, of course, my mother's half, there was no way they were owning slaves based on, they were in a different part of the world at the time. They weren't even living in the United States. And in case you don't know my ethnic background, that's implying that at least half of me is not even what we would consider Northern European, the people who had slaves for the most part here in the United States. So I just think that's a strange comment that I received. I think it's confusing because ultimately African American people, Black Americans, have European DNA. Granted, less of it, but we can't really have that conversation and demonize our DNA in that way. Because at some point, even people of the same race in our family tree, someone was a victim. Someone was a victim, no matter how you look at it. I mean, those of us who have Native American DNA are in that situation. At some point, Native Americans, and I'm going to censor how I'm going to say this, but whether it was the Spaniards coming over or whether it was the Europeans coming over, and well, I get it, Spaniards are in Europe, but specifically what I was talking about just then was people from Spain coming to Central America, modern day Mexico. And specifically I was talking about people from England coming over to New England, and that's what I'm talking about. No matter how you look at it, in our family trees, unless you're 100% the same thing and you've got a DNA test to prove it, you've got some horror stories in your ethnic background, in your family tree, no matter what. So am I supposed to feel guilty because I have a certain type of DNA? I don't. Am I supposed to? It's a very strange comment, but ultimately we all know that I make these videos, based on comments. That's the whole rule. And let me actually close this video by sharing this comment that I love. I love this comment that I just got from Miguel Gonzalez, one of my most faithful viewers. I made a video called "What is this effect called when you purposely want people to correct you?" Because that's ultimately how I do this. I am not an expert. I don't do research. I just start recording. Here's what Miguel said about my style of shooting videos. He said, quote, "We need to recognize that YouTubers are posting provocative comments just to get attention, not following an honest line, not what they think, though sometimes they may not even think deep enough. It is the downside of our dynamic time," end quote. And for me, that obviously swings both ways. That's for me, the YouTuber. I'm creating content that's going to engage you, and then people in the comment section are leaving very dramatic comments because they know that's going to get them attention, and the cycle is in motion at that point because the YouTuber knows, oh, that was a weird comment. I bet if I make a video about that, other people will have an opinion about it. And if I make a video about that person's comment, it will keep things going. That's the cycle. That's how YouTube works. People in the comments act out for attention by leaving an outrageous comment. And then I, the host, think, okay, I guess people will watch that. Let me make a video about that. And this video is no different. I'm very openly acknowledging that. So you've got plenty to think about. I've given you several ways you can go as far as leaving your comments. Your comment belongs right here.